Leonardo da Vinci. 2.
One of Leonardo's painting commissions in Milan was the Virgin of the Rocks for the Church of San Francesco Grande. Two versions of this work exist today. In one version, which is now in the Louvre Museum, Leonardo dared to be different by depicting the religious figures without halos. Also, the scenery in this work appears to have been painted from direct observation, in contrast to most artists of Leonardo's day who typically copied pictures of nature from books. The other version can be found in London's National Gallery. However, the figures have halos, and the surrounding rocks and plants look less realistic. For this reason, it is considered by some critics to be a collaborative work. In 1495, Leonardo was commissioned to decorate a wall of the dining hall in the monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie. This masterpiece, known as the Last Supper, was an entirely new representation of a popular religious scene. In depicting the last meal that Jesus had with his disciples, Leonardo chose to portray the exact moment when Jesus announced that one of them would betray him. The disciples each respond in different ways to the announcement. Leonardo skillfully brought the scene to life by showing emotions like shock, fear, and anger through the diverse facial expressions and gestures of the disciples. An additional effect was achieved by the table and dishes that looked just like those used by the monks themselves. This would have created the impression that the figures in the painting and the monks were all eating together in the dining hall. As word spread of its brilliance, the Last Supper soon became the most celebrated painting of its time. Unfortunately, the work deteriorated rapidly because Leonardo had used experimental methods that were technically unsound. A traditional fresco is painted with a limited range of watercolors on fresh plaster, so that the artist must work quickly before the plaster dries. But Leonardo wanted to work slowly on the Last Supper. Therefore, he experimented with a new technique of painting with tempera on dry plaster. This was similar to painting on canvas or wood, and enabled him to work with a wider range of colors and add changes days or even years later. But by the early 1500s, the paint had started to come off the painting. There have been several attempts to restore the work over the centuries. The most recent restoration project took over 20 years and was completed in 1999. With the fall of Milan to the French in 1499, the Sforzas were forced out of the city, and Leonardo was left without a patron. After a brief period in Venice as a military architect and engineer, he returned to Florence, where he worked on various artistic commissions from 1500 to 1506. Among these was the Battle of Anghiari, a mural for the City Hall of Florence. Although this would have been the largest painting of Leonardo's career, like so many of his works, it was never completed. Leonardo abandoned the project after experiencing problems with the experimental materials and techniques that he had used. Then, in the mid-16th century, Giorgio Vasari was commissioned to paint over the unfinished mural in the City Hall. The Battle of Anghiari was therefore thought to have been destroyed. However, there is an alternative theory that Vasari, who could not bring himself to destroy such a masterpiece, built another wall to hide it behind his own work. In fact, there is an inscription in a corner of Vasari's mural that says, "Search and you shall find," in Italian. If the Battle of Anghiari still exists, we might be able to find it by using advanced technology to see through the walls of the City Hall. In preparation for the mural, Leonardo made numerous sketches and completed a full-size cartoon that was copied by other artists. Since both this cartoon and the mural itself were later lost, these copies and some of Leonardo's original sketches are all that we have of this work today. Even in its incomplete state, the Battle of Anghiari was considered to be among Leonardo's finest achievements. Commissioned to glorify a Florentine victory in war, it depicts the scene of a furious battle between two soldiers on horseback. According to Vasari, who saw the original mural, it would be impossible to express the inventiveness of Leonardo's design for the soldiers' uniforms, which he sketched in all their variety, or the crests of the helmets and other ornaments, not to mention the incredible skill demonstrated in the shape and features of the horses, which Leonardo, better than any other master, created with their boldness, muscles, and graceful beauty. Another work from Leonardo's later years in Florence is La Gioconda, more commonly known by its nickname, the Mona Lisa. This portrait is now perhaps the world's most famous painting, renowned for the mastery of its technique and the mysteriousness of its subject. The subject of the Mona Lisa is a lady wearing a plain dark dress with a scarf hanging from her left shoulder and a veil over her long hair. The simplicity of her dress emphasizes the delicate features of her face and hands. Behind her, there are realistic images of flowing rivers and rocky mountains. The scenery gradually becomes smaller and less detailed in the background, showing Leonardo's skillful use of aerial perspective. According to Vasari's description, in this work of Leonardo's, there was a smile so pleasing that it was a thing more divine than human to behold. This mysterious smile of the Mona Lisa is largely achieved through the use of sfumato, a technique that was developed by Leonardo. By means of sfumato, the subtle gradation of tone and color to soften outlines, Leonardo created a smoky, delicate effect around the lady's lips and eyes. This makes it difficult to tell whether she is actually smiling or not. Her expression seems to change constantly as you look at her, so she almost looks alive. The Mona Lisa influenced countless portraits after it, and occupies an important place in the history of art. In 1508, Leonardo settled in Milan. There he was involved in various engineering projects, and seems to have devoted much of his energy to scientific research. From 1513, Leonardo continued his studies under the patronage of Giuliano de' Medici in the Vatican. Following the death of his patron in 1516, Leonardo moved to France. For the last 3 years of his life, he lived near the royal palace of King François I, under the official title of First Painter, Architect, and Engineer to the King. He spent most of his time organizing and editing his notebooks until his death on May 2, 1519.